episode of the Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today, on this day, I have the pleasure of sitting down with a gentleman by the name of Darryl Richie. He's an author and a speaker and a superhero with a superhero story, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with him today, learning more about his life and the amazing novels that he has written. But first and foremost, as I always do, sir, I take a quick moment to pause and say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we cannot get it back. So I truly appreciate you setting aside this time in your day to sit down and chat with me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned, you are truly a walking superhero with a superhero story. So, as we get started, I was wondering if I could trouble you to share with us some of your life uh, history so we can know what I'm talking about, referencing.
hmm Okay. Um, I was diagnosed with knee cancer called osteosarcoma when I was 14 years old, and it's a bone cancer. And so I went to ninth grade, I think, only the first week, I think. And then after that, I was in and out of the hospital for a year. And during that time of doing chemotherapy, I had to get a knee replacement. So I had to get a reconstructed knee. And then 2 months after 10th grade started, I was able to go back to school, was able to walk and act and run again. I did physical therapy and actually I made the basketball team in 11th grade with the metal knee.
Okay.
So, and then 12th grade came, the cancer came back again in the same knee. And 2 months after senior year started, I think. And I had to go through chemo all over again. But since I had a knee replacement, the doctor said the only way to save my life was to amputate my right leg. And now I'm a hip amputee, which means my whole right leg got amputated.
Mm.
And this year is actually my 21st anniversary of being cancer free and being a hip amputee. So yeah, I've through my 4 years of high school, like I've been through many lifetimes of pain, I believe.
Mm.
And I'm really not supposed to be here. Oh yeah, also when I was my second time I had cancer, I had lung cancer also, which is another reason why the doctor said to completely take my leg
Yeah.
because the cancer had spread to my lung. And then we caught that only on accident. I did a routine MRI, I think, and they saw something in my right lung, and they did a emergency biopsy that they surgically pull the cancer off of my lung. And if they would have waited a little bit longer, it could have spread, and I wouldn't be able to breathe. I probably wouldn't be here right now.
A true miracle.
Yeah,
You are
and
truly a walking miracle.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. So after high school, I took I think a year off to do physical therapy so I could walk with my new prosthetic leg. And I went to junior college, I graduated, and I went to university at Cal State University, Long
There
Beach,
you go.
2008,
So you went to Cal State and you got a degree in what again?
journalism, and I have a minor in Africana studies.
Awesome. So what do you think was the that kept you motivated through all of that? Because that's a lot of trials and tribulation.
My family, a lot, and then I don't know, I just have this drive in me just to keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
even though sometimes I don't know where I'm going sometimes. And I think without knowing, I think my ancestors had a lot to do with that. Like they obviously knew my purpose before I did. Like I think I know it now, but this is like 20 years later. But when I was going through it, I didn't know. Like I at the time, I just thought people who get cancer are older. Like I
Yeah.
never heard of children getting this type of disease,
Yeah.
but it was because I was young and I was active like in sports. Like I was sick, but I really wasn't sick, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I got
Like
you.
I was very healthy. Like I never stayed in the hospital more than I needed to.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
yeah, the doctors and nurses were always like, man, he's really knocking out these chemos where it would take other kids. They had to do like radiation and stuff. I never did. I just did my chemo and I left. I never stayed longer than I had to during those 14 and 17 years old.
Wow,
Yeah,
amazing,
so
amazing.
hmm
Hopefully it was because you were younger and able to recoup a little faster.
very
So,
much.
so the first time that you were diagnosed with cancer, did you go back and play sports? Because I'm hearing that you were an athlete, right?
Yeah, I did play basketball with a metal knee with a knee replacement in high school. I
Mm,
made the junior varsity and varsity team.
okay,
And but my senior year, I was on the team, but I didn't play because I was in and out of the hospital.
okay.
But yeah, I played the whole junior varsity season though.
Awesome, awesome. No excuses, no excuses.
hmm hmm
So when did writing come into your life?
Um, I think it was a little after high school since I couldn't physically play basketball. I thought, well, I can at least write about it.
Mm-hmm.
And out of all the subjects, writing always came easiest for me. And I was writing like for the school newspaper and stuff. I would like go to the games and I would
Okay.
write for the school newspaper. And I even wrote I know you know the rapper Nas.
Mm-hmm.
So he had an album called Untitled back in 2008.
Yeah.
And I wrote about that album. I remember people coming up to me like, man, I didn't know the paper wrote about stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because in that album, he talked about like racism and a little bit of African history in that album.
Okay.
And I would just write about stuff that people really didn't talk about that much or didn't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And like rappers like Nas and Tupac and Ice Cube, they're not afraid to go talk about that part of our history, like in their
Yeah.
music, which I really appreciate. Because
Yeah.
every day is not a party for us in this country.
That's true. That is true. And
Yeah.
they were very conscious or very conscious
hmm
rappers. Yeah.
hmm
So is that where the spark for learning more about our ancestors and African civilizations came about, or was it already there?
Actually, it came way later. Like, yeah, because I have a minor in Africana studies, but all the classes I took were about African American history. Like I
Okay.
didn't I didn't do anything about Africa. I think I took one class which was a folklore class
Mm-hmm.
about I think Anansi the spider. He's from the Ashanti people from ancient
Mm-hmm.
Ghana. Well, not ancient, from present day Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, I really didn't like I know I'm an African man. I really didn't look at that continent as like my home continent back then because I've been so far detached. I just didn't. And then plus, like all the commercials and stuff I saw growing up was keeping us away from our home continent. Everything
Mm-hmm.
was always just so negative, like just the worst place in the world.
Yeah, there's that myth.
So, hmm so it wasn't until remember the barbecue Becky, that whole incident that happened in this country.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So that kind of sparked it for me.
Okay.
It was just weird. Like, I was just like, why is this even a thing? 'Cause it was ridiculous, right? And then I was like, what did we do wrong where we came to this country the way that we did? And even to that day, the barbecue Becky thing, till 1619 when our ancestors first came here, like, what did we do? So I was like, okay, I got to go to the source, which is in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a video on YouTube. It was called The Hidden Accomplishments of African People by
Mm-hmm.
the real Merkaba. And I liked how he broke it down. He talked about Egypt, but he didn't stay in Egypt, which I'm glad he did.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's talking about these different civilizations, he had books where he got this information from while he was talking. And one of the books was The Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr.
Mm.
Chancellor Williams.
Good book. Yeah.
And that book kicked it off for me. That was the first book I read that kicked it off for me. And that book really changed me because after I read it, it like had me stand still for like 3 days. And then the world was going around me. I'm just like, how can all this have happened? And like, we're like, nothing is changing. Like, we had civilizations that was the same size as all of Europe. We had one country the same size as all of Europe. And like, and then how we fall down like so far. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can our ancestors let our continent, which is the second largest in the world, fall to a continent that we had our country, one of our countries, the same size as their whole continent.
True.
So I was it just didn't make any sense. And then after reading that book, it made sense. Dr. Churchill really broke it down, like how that mindset of the medieval African man and woman back then, like you can't compare it to now. It's like two different worlds.
True.
Like it makes sense. And one of the things that caught my attention was we our ancestors didn't see ourselves as one African people. We saw ourselves by our ethnic groups or tribes,
Tribes, yeah.
and our alliance was with that ethnic group. So when the wars came, like if I'm Songhai and you're Yoruba, your your um your attachment is with your people, and mine is with mine. So if we go to war, I'm gonna make sure you gonna be able to go on that slave ship and not me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we were divided in that way. We were all African people, but they just didn't see themselves that way.
Yeah, we were
And
separated
like
by our
that's
tribes.
hmm and that's what we as a people need to realize, that we are one people
Mm-hmm.
in the diaspora in the West, the people in Africa today, and the diaspora in the East.
Mm-hmm. Is there
Yeah,
is there any particular section of Africa that caught your interest over another?
yeah, yeah. So after I wrote my autobiography about my cancer situation and
Mm-hmm.
everything, so I was thinking about like another book to write, but I wanted to have like a good setting. 'Cause I wanted
Okay.
like the setting to be like another character. Then once I
Okay.
started digging into my history, I chose the Songhai Empire,
Mhm.
which was the last civilization before the slave trade. And just a few things about this country that caught my attention that I didn't know anything about. The Songhai Empire during the 5th and 16th century was the largest empire in West Africa. It was the same size of all of Europe combined. Um, it covered the present-day countries of Niger, northern Nigeria, no, parts of Niger, parts of northern Nigeria, parts of Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, the Gambia, and Guinea. And this region is where 93% of Black Americans came from. So 93 Black Americans came from this general area, which was the whole Songhai Empire and plus other countries surrounding it.
Okay. Okay.
And this region or this empire, it almost touched both the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Like that's how large it was. It was one of the largest countries in all of Africa, in the whole history of Africa. And Black Americans are responsible for this country being so successful.
Mm.
Um, so arguably probably the greatest emperor was Askia Muhammad Toure the first. He was also known as Askia the Great. Like that was his name, Askia the Great.
The great. Okay.
And he was responsible for the Songhai Empire being the same size as Europe.
Okay.
Like he swept up through his conquest. He swept down and conquered much of northern Nigeria and out to the west to the beaches and to the ocean where Senegal and the Gambia is.
Okay. Okay.
So from inner West Africa, he had his arms sweep all the way to the west out to the ocean. And all this was his country.
Okay.
And he reigned for 36 years. And travelers anywhere in his country were safe while during his reign. He, people said that people felt like they're in his own court while they're in his country. That's how safe his country was.
What a time
Yeah.
to be alive. What a time to be alive.
hmm
So,
Yeah.
so, so, what were some other things that the Songhai Empire was known for? What
Oh,
countries?
so you know how people come to this country like they go to college? So that's what we had in West Africa. We had university kingdoms, like the Kingdom of Gao, which was the capital of the Songhai, the Kingdom of Timbuktu. You probably heard of Timbuktu before, which was known as the Kingdom of Gold,
Okay.
and also the Kingdom of Jin and the Kingdom of Watala. These four kingdoms were known as university kingdoms, and probably the University of Sankore, which is in Timbuktu. This university attracted all people from West Africa to attend and even attracted scholars from foreign countries to come teach at this university. And this university, they had doctors, lawyers, professors. The book trade was sometimes more lucrative than the gold trade. And education was very much important amongst our people, which it makes sense that they made laws for Black Americans. It was illegal for us to read and write when we were in bondage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and then the last president of the Sankore University, his name was Akmi Baba. So he was arguably the greatest scholar educator of the 16th century.
Okay.
And he had a library of 1,600 books. He wrote 40 books and wrote a comprehensive dictionary. So this is just one man who did all this at the end of the Songhai Empire. Like, we don't know the rest of the professors and doctors who probably did probably more than him. He was
Yeah.
just the last one.
Yeah.
So education is very much a part of our whole living situation. We believe so much in education. So
Yeah.
when I started reading things like how they made laws for us, where we actually it was a death sentence if we were caught reading and writing here
Mm-hmm.
in this country, it makes sense. Like a one man could write over 40 books, have a approaching library of 1,600 books, and write a dictionary. And Dr. Chancellor Williams, he said, like Africans should be dropped here. He said, what man, Asian or European, did this during this time?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the part of our history that they don't want us to know about. And it makes sense.
The amazing contributions that we have had. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we understand that there's been so much to suppress who we are and our contributions. What led to the downfall of the empire?
Yeah. So, Songhai Empire was first, it was invaded by the Moors of Morocco, which is in Northwest Africa.
Okay.
So the Moors are the Arabs, the Berbers, and mixed Africans. Mixed
Okay.
Africans being like Afro Asians.
Mm-hmm.
And mixed people back then, they didn't see themselves as they were mixed people. They were they were they were more in line with their father. Like if their father was Asian or European, they would be with them
Okay.
and not really with their mother's people, which were
Okay.
Black people.
Okay.
So like these were the Moors of Northwest Africa. But I don't know if you heard of the Black Moors, though. They were the ones responsible for bringing Europe out of the Dark Ages.
Mm.
Like they were two different people.
Moors, two types of Moors.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a Tanzaga salt mine that's in between Songhai Empire and Morocco. So they were both kind of, even though it was under Songhai territory, Morocco wanted this salt mine so they could profit from it.
Okay, I got you.
So they were kind of going back and forth with that. And then one day, the Moroccan Sultan Al Mansur he wanted to invade Songhai, but his councils of war they would have meetings like, it's dangerous for us to cross the Sahara Desert because you know it's hot and our people they could just die there. They
Mm-hmm.
said even birds lose their way in this area.
Okay.
And then the Sultan was like, well, it would be easy conquest because the Songhai, they don't have guns. We have guns and cannons. All they have is spears, swords, and bow and arrows.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was told that the Songhai Empire was richer than all of North Africa combined. So they wanted our riches, they wanted our gold in inner West Africa.
Okay.
So Morocco, they hire European mercenaries, which are the
Oh.
British and the Spanish,
Mhm.
and they come down. But Askia Isak, one of the emperors, because I told you they were kind of going back and forth,
Mhm.
and then the Askia said that told the Sultan of Morocco, like I'm never gonna give up an inch of my country. So he starts sending him presents, and he sends him a present of silver sandals, which is supposed to represent or symbolize once you wear out these silver sandals is when you'll be able to get a part of my country. So and now see this right here, like I know this is our people because
Slick like that.
yeah. So you can only imagine how angry that Sultan was in Morocco. Like with
Mhm.
these sandals, like you probably knew what they represented. Yeah, so but they ended up coming down from Morocco with with the mercenaries from Europe, the Spanish and the British,
Mhm.
and they came down and the Songhai. What they did, they would have their herd of cattle, and they would like send a stampede to rush through the enemy's army to kind of run them over.
Okay.
But but the cattle they got scared once they heard the gunshots, and then the cattle turned around and slaughtered the Songhai army.
Oh.
So a lot of the Songhai army was had died because of that, and some stayed and fought, and others retreated. But like this is like the of our people. Like once they knew they were losing, some of the Songhai soldiers they literally just sat Indian style on their shield, ready to be killed, because they knew it was over.
Oh.
But once Moroccan army came down. They destroyed our university kingdoms, Gao, Timbuktu, Watala, and Jin. They destroyed the temples, the big buildings. They looted and they burned down the libraries. They stole the treasury. Water wells were filled in. They burnt all the crops. They took doors off of homes, cut down trees. Like it was apocalyptic what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was terrible. And and um and then they Morocco they stayed for about I think close to like 10 years, but they couldn't run the country because it was too big.
Mm.
And they didn't know how to govern a country like this big, so they
Mm-hmm.
ended up leaving. And then after the fall of Shanghai is when the transatlantic slave trade really gained more traction. So
Okay.
we are already weak from that more European invasion.
Okay.
And then when the Morocco finally left, our people were still trying to organize like who's going to be ruler next.
Uh,
And the next country that was next that was better than Songhai was the Kenin Bornu Empire,
mm-hmm.
and they decided to incorporate guns into their army, which the Songhai failed to do.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the Songhai people, like they were very religious people because they were heavy like in the Islam,
Okay.
and the Songhai government officials they were just like we're not going to use guns made by Europeans against our Muslim brothers. And even though Morocco, they were Muslims, Shanghai were Muslims, they didn't stop Morocco from coming in and doing what they did, even
Mm-hmm.
though both countries were Muslim countries.
Mm-hmm.
And within that faith, you're not supposed to lift arms, harm, or enslave your brother, your family and religion. And some of the Shanghai people were running out to them like, wait, we are your brothers in religion. And they still got shot, point blank range, and they still died.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, even with Christianity, right? Even one of the slave ships was named Jesus. And and the captain of that ship was John Hawkins from England, right? So they use these religions to conquer us, right? But they're used as forms of conquest.
Yes.
And then by the time the conquest is over, like millions of our people have already been exiled to America or elsewhere in the
Mhm.
world,
Right.
or you're conquering and colonizing your own country in Africa.
True. True.
Hmm.
So when the transatlantic slave trade happened, um, most of us came from the Songhai Empire area.
Yeah, yeah. The Western, it's called the Western Sudan.
Okay.
93% of Black Americans today came from this region,
Okay. Now,
which is
go ahead.
it's the region is sandwiched between the Sahara in the north and the forests at the south.
Now, you've mentioned there was a lot of infighting already going on between us in the country of Africa, and there's always the story that we hear that it was actually us that sold us to
Hmm.
enslavement. Is that
Hmm.
the case?
It's not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
There are some of our rulers who did participate in the slave trade and did get rich, but it's nowhere near the European profits.
Mm-hmm.
Like the European profits was 180 to 280, 180 to 200%. Like you can look at England and compare that to Ghana and Nigeria. That's their former colonies, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
France to Mali,
Mm-hmm.
or Portugal to Guinea-Bissau or Angola, or Belgium to the Congo. And you can just see it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also what's not talked about is like the pressure these rulers were under. Like if they don't meet certain quotas, them themselves and their royal family would be forced onto the slave ships and
Okay.
their people. So that's why you have kingdoms fighting other kingdoms because they didn't want to be enslaved. They didn't meet certain quotas.
Okay. So the quotas you mean as far as generating enough funds for the country?
Uh, Quotas as Europeans coming to these rulers saying, I want this many slaves.
Okay,
If
okay,
you don't meet this quota, we're going to enslave you
okay, I
and
understand
your
what you're
people.
saying. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow. Wow. So much history that has been.
Oh, yeah. Like, all of I've heard is your people sold you and that's why you're here. And like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no which kingdom, which ruler.
No context
Yeah.
to it.
Hmm.
No
Yeah.
context to it. Okay. So what are some you've mentioned a little bit, but what are some of the more impactful lessons that you've learned as you've been studying this and unpacking this? What are some of the takeaways that have been the most meaningful to you?
So for me, I like going into these countries by books and lectures and stuff. Um, Especially like the Yoruba people. Like I think from my father's side and my father's father down that line, I think I come from these people. Um, Especially the Ife subgroup within this
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And their country, Yoruba land, like our countries were named after our ethnic groups or tribal names. And their country was Southwest Nigeria, parts of present day Benin Republic and parts of Togo Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So their country was actually three different countries of today. So when the Europeans came, like the British, they conquered Nigeria, and then the French conquered Benin Republic, and then the Germans and later France conquered Togo. So if you have Yoruba people in this stretch, you have
Mm-hmm.
Yoruba people now forced to speak French and German or English now.
Mm-hmm.
But like this country, I think is where I think I'm from. They're right on the coast of in Nigeria,
Okay.
and the Ife people in particular, they are originally spiritual, but highly advanced creative and artistically.
Okay.
And this country or the Ife Empire within Yoruba land, they they really didn't have a significant army. So they didn't go like through conquest like what the Songhai people did.
Okay.
They actually expanded their empires through commerce and like through their way of life and their living. They weren't really they weren't definitely were not a warlike people, but they saw themselves as warlike and brave. Yeah, they were more focused on they're very creative people. They like a lot of the art that came from Africa, people point to this country with
Okay.
the Ife, Yoruba, like the heads of like the kings and stuff, and how very detailed they are. Which a lot of them they're still in the British Museum right now. So they were stolen and lifted and taken to just like all the other arts of Africa. And yeah, this country was, I mean, the Ife Kingdom, the Ife Empire. I think I'm from which is technically in the middle of Southwest Nigeria, so it's a little bit inland.
Okay.
It's not like at the coast.
Okay.
And I always felt like I was from the like a more greenery area with like rivers instead of like a beach.
Hmm.
And the Ife kingdom fits perfectly where that region is.
Yeah,
So
feels like home
like
to
I
you.
said, yeah, like I said, 93% come from like the Songhai Empire. So I'm thinking I'm one of that 7% that comes outside of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so you will be making a trip over there anytime soon?
Oh, I wish. I really want to travel the whole of what was the Yoruba land and definitely go to the Ife, LA Ife is what they call it.
Mhm.
And even the word Ife translated to English, it means love. So the love kingdom, the love people. And also like their creation story, or how the world came together, how they saw it was God or Mare. He sent down heavenly beings to earth, and the heavenly beings were known as Orishas.
Mhm.
And the whole earth was nothing but water. So the Orishas came down with a quantity of earth, palm nut, and a chicken. So when the Orishas threw the dirt onto the water, they put the chicken on the dirt, and the chicken scratched and pecked. And that's how all the continents and islands of the world came into existence.
Mhm.
And then when the gold chain from heaven finally hit land, that was the Ife kingdom and is known as the source of the spreading, where all humans came from, which fit in line with all humanity started in Africa.
Mhm.
So like our ancestors, they knew who they were 100%.
True.
Like they knew they were the first humans and people came from them.
True.
Other races came from them. Even when the first whites came, like they were greeted and they were said like welcome back home because they've been gone for so long. They didn't look at them as like invaders at first. They welcomed them home. It was
Mhm.
just at the end they got backstabbed, and a lot of our people were stolen or they were conquered and colonized in their own country.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about the different educational systems in Africa. Is it true that like the British, the Greeks, and stuff were going over to have educational experiences in
Oh
Africa?
yeah. So especially like in Egypt during the ancient world, like Herodotus and Homer, like they've said multiple times that a lot of what they got and for their civilization in Greece, it came from Africa. And they borrowed a lot from Africa, even like our gods and goddesses, like Asar and Aset from ancient Egypt, which
Mhm.
when the Greeks when they conquered that territory, they changed it to Osiris and Isis. So like a whole lot of their stuff, like they admitted that yeah, we got it from Africa. It was from these black people. And then even said the black people had kinky curly hair, they were dark skinned. Like they called Africa the land of the burnt faced people.
Mhm.
Like they knew they weren't European people. We were
Mhm.
different from them.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the contrast from white to black, like they knew what it was. And then we had the city of Alexandria with the libraries and stuff, which Timbuktu actually had the most manuscripts, even more than Egypt. So the city of Alexandria had 400,000 manuscripts, but Timbuktu had 700,000.
That's a lot of books.
Yeah, so and this is West Timbuktu, this is West Africa where they say our ancestors were savages.
Yeah.
But here we go, 700,000 manuscripts in their like university
And
in
how long
Timbuktu.
ago? I mean, and how long ago we were producing that a body of work? I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Exactly. And this is Timbuktu, that's only medieval time. That's not that long ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like ancient Egypt, that's like ancient times, that's further back. But Timbuktu during the 15th, 16th century is not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, because you think we've been here in what, 500 years in the United States of
Mm-hmm.
America. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really not that long. So,
And also like we've been here, but we've ruled in West Africa, like ancient Ghana, Mali, and Shanghai, and all those other countries, lasted for 1,000 years or longer, which
mm-hmm.
is which is like double what we've been here so far.
Yeah.
Like we don't even know that. Like we've been free and in control of our own destiny 500 years longer than we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we just don't know.
That's true. That's true. It's just so amazing. When you think about, I think there's only one country in Africa that was not colonized, but every country in Africa was
Hmm.
colonized, and the damage and what was lost in that whole transition. It's just,
Hmm.
and it's just as of today that people are starting to say, okay, yeah, we were wrong. And what made you think that that was right to do to people anyways? I mean, it's just unfathomable that people would, say
Well,
that.
you have to look at what was going on in Europe. Why would they even have to come to Africa in the first place?
That's a
Like
good point.
during the time ancient Ghana, Mali, and Songhai were ruling, this was West Africa's golden age. They were still in their dark ages in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They're still dealing with famine and plague and the Black Death, which took one third of their whole continent.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
So they were really going through it like heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And like this now it makes sense after their dark ages they came to Africa and look what they did. And look
Mm-hmm.
what they did to the American Indians here. And then what they did to the Aboriginal Australians. Like like we are the only people besides the American Indian and the Aboriginal Australians have our continent taken from us, but we're the only people who've been forcibly exiled to other continents by the millions.
Displaced, yes. I think,
Hmm.
I mean, you have us in Brazil, you have us in Puerto
Yeah.
Rico, you have us
Hmm.
in Cuba. I mean, we
Hmm.
were just deposited all over the place. And,
Hmm.
the devastation that causes,
Hmm.
is just tremendous. And there's no way to repay any of that back.
Yeah,
So,
there's no money. Like just from the transatlantic slave trade alone, it's been estimated like 50 million black people were displaced and 80 million died, I think. Like that's a lot. That's a whole lot of people.
mm-hmm.
And that's not including the Arab slave trade that happened in East Africa. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
just the transatlantic slave trade that
Mm-hmm.
mostly depopulated West and Central Africa.
Mm.
And then like the Songhai Empire, like when the whites finally came, it looked like a wasteland because they depopulated, the people were gone, and they were stealing all the resources to build up their countries. And they weren't really they really didn't care about their African colonies. Like they kind of just let them like, okay, we're just gonna steal your stuff and build. Like you could just look at different countries of Europe, those colonial, those people
Yeah.
who participated. You can just see it. Even you look at the United States. Compare
Mm-hmm.
United States to different. European countries that participated.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah,
right in everybody's
you could go
faces.
to Washington D.C. and see some of the architecture and stuff, and you can say, okay, I know where that came from. You stole that from
Hmm.
someplace, you know. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, it's the devastation and the continual desire to not recognize the
yeah,
contributions.
that's the main thing. Like, that's another thing. They just in this country they just want to focus just on slavery. Like that's all we're known for was how we lost and how they're on top and we're at the bottom.
Mhm.
Like there was a time when we were on top when we didn't have to go into other people's countries and continents and do what they did.
Mhm.
We were just being ourselves naturally without like even before the 16th century, Dr. Chester Williams said most black people in Africa didn't even know a white person existed. They never seen a white face before.
Mhm.
Like Shaka Zulu, before the whites came, he didn't know he never seen a white person before. Just like the rest of our ancestors, they didn't know they existed.
Mhm.
And for thousands of years, all you see is black people. Then make you different from the Yoruba or the Songhai would be culture,
Mhm.
or like if they have like the tribal markings on their faces
Mhm.
and like their language. Like if you see nothing but people who look similar to you, the thing that make you look be different from somebody else would be culture.
Mhm.
Like with white and black is easy. You can tell who's different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were also the first travelers. Like, the story goes, we were here in America long before your
Oh yeah.
Christopher Columbuses and stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Like the Olmec civilization in Mexico. You
Mm-hmm.
saw like with the big heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like literally one of those heads looked like one of my uncles. Like I showed and I showed it to some of my family members. Like, look, this doesn't look like my uncle. And, oh yeah, it does. Literally, lips, the
Mm-hmm.
nose, everything.
Yeah.
And then like the Mali Empire, the empire before Shanghai, they sailed to America almost 200 years before Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
During like this is like that was during our golden age, where they were still in their dark ages.
Mm-hmm. We had,
Yeah, and then
cures for all sorts of diseases and everything. I mean, there's
hmm
even the story of, when we were brought here and enslaved, some of the first vaccinations came from the
hmm
slaves because we brought that with us here
hmm
from Africa.
yeah. hmm Even like the Shanghai, they had hospitals. Like historian and traveler Ibn Battuta, his brother was blind. His brother had cataract surgery by the Shanghai doctors and was able to see. See, this is medieval times. This is medieval Africa. Yeah, like what we were told, but we just had what huts, no, like no buildings, school of medicine, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then like Malcolm X actually is a genetic line from the Shanghai people. So you can only imagine people with Malcolm X personality running the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. Like they were very no nonsense people. Right is right, wrong is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the Shanghai people were known for being intellectual, fearless warriors, and that describes Malcolm X 100%.
Yeah, true,
Mm-hmm.
true, true. Yeah, I think I had read somewhere that some of the tribes that were brought here as enslaved people, that started a lot of the riots, came from certain areas of Africa
Mm-hmm.
because that was just in their spirit to,
Oh
fight
yeah.
for their freedom
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And it's just really amazing the very deliberate and intentional story creation storyline that was
Yeah.
created about us being savage, and
Mm-hmm.
you know um, we need to be harnessed and controlled, and white folks were better than us, but it plays into making others feel comfortable about enslaving us,
Mm-hmm.
to place us low and below. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's a whole lot of work. That's a whole
Yeah.
lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole lot of work.
Definitely. Yeah.
So your books are out now, or
No.
oh,
So, um, I've sent one in,
okay,
but as you can tell with all this information, it's not
right,
gonna be, yeah. But what I decided to do was to create like a destruction and back civilization type of book, but with superhero elements attached to it.
oh, I like that.
So I have it where I created a character, and the character is kind of while he's living, the reader can kind of learn about the Songhai Empire as this character is living. And I chose to a superhero story where the main character, his name is Justice, and I spell it JUST-US. So it looks like just us. So black
Justice.
people, when we read it, so remind us that it's just us to get us out of this situation.
True.
So I created a superhero where he's able to shoot electricity out of his hands, use it as like a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a video game called Infamous that came out in 2009 and 2011. And the people who Sucker Punch Productions, people who made the game, they did a really good job of making electricity like a weapon. And they play with duality where depending on your actions, you could be a superhero or a supervillain. And the
Okay.
world will reflect like how you act in the world. It will reflect how the people will act towards you.
Okay. Okay.
So in my story, I have it where during like way prehistory, where black people were they were immortal and they had superhuman abilities. Some could fly, she could shoot electricity, so able to control the weather patterns and stuff. And then when the Hyksos invaded Egypt, is when their superpowers became dormant and they're
Mm,
becoming human like everybody else.
mm,
But when the Assyrians invaded Egypt, is when I have it where Justice he gets bit by a black mamba snake in Uganda and he dies.
mm.
But his soul is brought back to the underworld by the god Asar and Offset from ancient Egypt. And they're like sitting on a round table and they're telling Justice like we need you because this transatlantic slave trade is coming. We need you to
Wow.
save our children. And then Justice is like, okay, I'm gonna take on this task. So from the time he died up until he is born, when he becomes a Songhai person, he's training with his electricity superpowers of how to stop these invaders from Europe from coming in and stealing black people and taking them away.
I like
And
that.
he also has a weapon called a kapinga, which is a throwing knife.
Hmm.
And it's actually made from the people of South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So
Okay.
it's a knife that sticks out three different ways, and it
Okay.
could be thrown up to 50 feet, I think. But with my character, he could throw it up to 60 feet, and he could recall it back to him from anywhere in the world. And he has two of them.
Hmm.
So you can imagine a throwing knife with electricity on it coming at you. How devastating that would be.
Oh,
Yeah. So when Justice is born, I have him living as a Songhai person, growing up, and when he's 14 years old, I have it where he's able to control his electricity. And then when he's 17 years old is when he gets these knives from his father from like a birthday gift.
hmm.
So I have kind of connected with my life, what happened to me when I was 14,
Oh,
17.
okay.
Because 14, I was diagnosed with cancer, had to get a knee replacement. And that 17 is when I lost my leg. But for Justice, he finally could control electricity because I have a little part where the kids want to go swim in the Niger River. they kind of use a section of it as like a pool. And Justice wanted to go swimming, when the king was like, "No, you're gonna kill everybody in the pool because you're made of electricity." And like people were outcasting him because of that. So it's just stuff like that I kind of play with.
Okay.
And also, when he gets his Kapingas from his father, he tells his father that he wants the blaze to be black and the handle to be gold. And the black represents who he is as he becomes a black man, and the gold represents his country, which is where he lays his head, because this region was known as the Gold Country. It was known as the land of gold, ruled by the lords of gold.
Awesome. So we have to wait a little bit longer for this, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's the first book. Right now, I'm working on part two right now.
Okay.
And the first book is more of a male energy, and the second book is going to be more of a female energy.
Okay.
So the first book is more Songhai in Africa, is very linear, but the second book is more focused on navigating through the slave trade and trying to be free from that. And it's also superhero elements, but the first book I would say is more like 75% superhero, um 15% history. And then the second book I think is more, it's more 75% history and 15% superhero elements.
I like the way that sounds. It sounds like Storm and Black Panther
Mm-hmm.
have nothing on what you're about to put out. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
this. All righty. Especially the way it incorporates our history, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to learn that, and it's in a way that it can be digestible for all age brackets, so I
Mm-hmm.
really like that. I'm looking forward to that. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sir, I'm going to ask you my random question, and then I'm going to ask you to tell us how we connect with you, so
Mm-hmm.
we can keep an eye on for when the books are coming out and the rest
Okay.
of the stuff that you got going on. But let me ask you my random question here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we got here. Let's see what I got here. Let's see here. What's one thing you always procrastinate on?
Um, when I get a new idea, and so I like to sit in my head and let it kind of go through the story in my head from beginning to end before I put anything down,
Okay.
which I'm doing better at that now, especially with my phone. I can write notes down.
Oh yeah.
So that's probably because I don't want to lose my creativity, because once it's gone, it's like you can never get it back.
That's
And a
true.
good idea, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So glad we have the phone to keep track of these things.
Mhm.
So how do we connect with you and keep our eye out on you for when the books come out and
Yeah.
all that stuff?
So my website is called calmandstrong.net.
Mhm.
And at the bottom of the website, I have all my social media handles.
Okay.
Yeah, so and also I could talk a little about the name Calm and Strong is who I am, because I have a calm personality, and strong because adversity is able to overcome, beating cancer twice and navigating through this world with one leg, with a prosthetic.
I love your story. I love your story. And you also do speaking engagements and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I do talk about my experience with cancer and everything. And also, I'm looking forward to speak more about our African history and my books in that way and my characters.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I have enjoyed my time with you today. Your story is just so inspirational, and I also enjoy that you're taking the time to delve into our history. It's just so important, especially in today's times. It seems like they're doing their best to suppress a lot of our history. So
Hmm.
we have to do the personal work to learn it ourselves and teach others. So it's nice to see that there's somebody out here doing that. So I appreciate you for that. And I am
Hmm.
looking forward for when it comes out. And I'm going to speak this out. Hopefully it'll turn into a
Hmm.
movie. Hopefully the book will turn into a
I
movie.
know. Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
so we will will speak that to existence. So I just appreciate what you're doing, and I'm so impressed. And just keep on keeping on, and keep on writing those notes as we speak. Okay, so we don't lose any creativity.
Yeah.
Awesome. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That is all for this week's episode of the Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.